Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. Yes, David Brown from Finastra. For those of you who are not familiar with the name Finastra, it's a year old this month, so we're only formed as a company a year ago. It's a merger of what was Mises and D&H Fundtech. So we came together a year ago, but still very much focused in the same way with our customers and how we operate. As said, my background is to do with payments, so I'm going to take you through a little journey today. I mean, it's already been a very interesting time. It's been really good to be here and see the enthusiasm of all the people and got such an interest in what takes place with payments. It really is a challenging time for payments and there's a lot happening there. So what I want to focus on today is talking about some of those changes, but how it may apply to your back-end solutions and how you're doing things, because it's all well and good to have these nice new apps and be able to do things there, but it's all about how your back-end systems can deal with some of that. I'm not going to get technical. I'm not going to go into detail on them. I'm certainly happy to take questions at the end, and hopefully this will trigger you to think about what you're doing with your back-end processing and what things you might need to change going forward. So, just firstly, payments, such an important part of the business for the banks. It brings in a huge part of your revenue each year. It is a very large business, and you know the payments in the economy is significant and it's only going to increase and go forward. So it's certainly an area of business that everyone wants to remain in. Now, there are many different players, as was shown yesterday, and everybody's talking about all these different startups, different fintechs that are coming along, playing in this marketplace, creating challenges. But New Zealand, here, you've got a really good record with what you've been able to do with your payments. You know, most people have bank accounts. Most people do digital payments. SBI is one of the fastest and best clearings for batch payments in the world. But, as has already been pointed out, what do you do with threats like Bitcoin or digital coins? What about what Uber did to the taxi industry and how it's really changed what takes place there? Or even worse, the BlackBerry. How many people in the room here used to swear by their BlackBerry 10 years ago and do it all? I certainly did. How many people now use BlackBerry? It's very important to think about. You need to make some change. You need to be willing to adapt and not just rest on what is some very good things that you actually do, and challenge yourself to move forward, to stay relevant. So just three of the areas that was brought actually up, three of them actually fit in nicely with what you presented yesterday morning, Steve, on the stage, is dealing with ISO 20002. It's not something that you do as well as you could here in New Zealand. Being able to do things 24/7, executing those payments and moving them around. And also being able to deal with dressing, certainly from a centralised type process. It's something that the banks need to think about here, how they're going to deal with that moving forward. And there are other things as well. And I'm going to touch on these a little bit more as we move forward. So just to push into some of these trends, I just want to start with talking about society, and I've got up here, for those who can't quite see it clearly, cheques and cash. And you know, everybody here is very aware of the cost of the paper cheques to the banks, and also cash. What it costs you to go and put money into the ATMs, to top it up, securely travel and move the money around. There's a huge cost to that. There's also a cost to the corporates, the SMEs that use it as well. That seems a hidden cost to them. You go to a country like Sweden, where they've got their real-time payment scheme called Swish. There, 70% of the millennials regularly use Swish for making payment transfers. A lot of these people don't take cash with them when they go out. They know that they can deal with any type of payment situation using their phone. So it makes a big change. It's about a mindset change. It will take time for it to roll through different economies, but they do get groundswells up. The technology side of things, the 24/7. Open APIs, again, a topic that's been talked about here. When you go and look at open APIs, if I really bring it back though to the key thing to do with the payments domain from a back-end payment processing perspective, there's two key open APIs. One is about being able to do payment initiation, how you actually can have third parties trigger transactions. And secondly is about inquiries. What's the status of my payment? What payment transactions have I done recently? Again, I'll elaborate a little bit more with some examples there. And on the blockchain side, digital currencies. Blockchain, from our perspective and what we're seeing with some of the banks, are just treating it like another rail, another way to deliver payment messages. So you've got your choice of being able to send it by SWIFT. Maybe it's Western Union. Or you may want to send it by a blockchain. Maybe it's Ripple. Maybe other blockchain providers will come along that will help with that delivery of payments. From a bank payment processing perspective, key thing there is being able to make decisions when I should be able to send my payment via blockchain versus sending it through SWIFT or SWIFT GPI. And being able to put that in place and make those decisions and then change things as the market practice or your needs or your customers' need change in the future. Similarly for digital currencies. So being able to support currencies in your payment processing side of things, it shouldn't really matter too much whether it's some sort of an electronic digital currency that's put in place or an actual a normal fiat currency that you're processing as today. The system should be able to support that type of transaction. Yes, you might need slightly different checks and regulation things take place with it, but at the end of the day, it is just a currency. It may have an exchange to some other type of currency, being able to handle those in a similar way. That's what you need to frame from your payments platform or your payment solution side of things. There's a number of legal, regulatory and other decisions, policy decisions that maybe are outside the payments processing domain that still need to be catered for, but making sure you've got that right platform, being able to process them as they become available. On regulation or market change and so forth, as we touched on, the real-time instant payments. As I go around the region, as Steve talks about, I've been up in Hong Kong, down to Malaysia, Thailand, you know, they're all putting in, or Thailand's already put theirs in, but putting in real-time payments type schemes. Singapore's obviously got theirs in place. Other countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam are all looking to put in place as well their own real-time payment schemes. So it's very much growing in the region. The banks are looking at what they need to do with that. It's triggering them to go through the same processes as the banks, like in Australia, went through to deciding how they should do NPP. What's interesting there is that they're now starting to talk about cross-border real-time payments. So being able to connect up, the MAS in Singapore, Bank of Thailand have announced that they want to connect up their real-time payment systems, also with the Malaysian RPP scheme, to be able to do real-time payments between people in those three countries. Hong Kong, when they put in faster payments, FPS, they're going to also do renminbi or CNY currency as part of that. They're going to connect it up to China and be able to allow payments to move between mainland China and Hong Kong using it. So from a platform perspective, processing capability, pretty much real-time payments processing can be supported now on platforms that are out there. The challenges will be how you deal with settlement, how the FX rates are dealt with. They're more policy type decisions or but things that need to be done on top of it, but that payment processing capability exists today in systems out there. I touch on ISO 20022, and what I really want to mention here is that The good thing about ISO 20022 is it brings in a standard, but what's most important about it is the fact that you can actually, with that particular type of standard, carry additional information. So it doesn't really matter what the standard is, it's about everybody agreeing and being able to bring that extra information with your payment messages. Can your back-end systems be able to support holding that information, handle attachments? What will you be able to deal with that? That's what the banks are grappling with. It's very easy in some of the countries. They might initially do just a conversion from existing format to ISO 20022, but risk losing data. And that's maybe okay for person-to-person type payments because you normally don't have a lot of data travelling with it. But it becomes more important as you expand your ecosystem and want to do additional type transactions. Similarly, Swift GPI is also creating challenges and opportunities for banks. Going into the region, talking to banks in Malaysia, Thailand, who have not yet really adopted GPI. They want to, but they go and look at their back-end systems. They think, how am I going to do that? How can I ensure that my payments are all responded to within the SLA times for those payments? What should I be doing to speed up automatic responses? The fact I've got things across multiple systems for my payments. How do I make sure that I'm tracking my statuses? So it's like ISO 20022, it's presenting challenges to those banks, how they can actually support and their payment processing. Throw on top of that the general real-time payments, and the banks are rethinking what their platform needs to be for dealing with payments. The competition, and I'll touch a little bit on this, everyone's very well aware of the competitors that are on the board there, of what's taking place, and they really are throwing out challenges. I like the example yesterday where it talked about going Alibaba and Alipay as to what it's able to do. I go to China a lot. Everybody there is using WeChat. As that they all saying, sign up, use it, and it's about bringing that experience of, yes, you can move money between your accounts, but it's much more than that. It's about being able to pay for goods online. It's being able to go and order that taxi through WeChat. It's being able to go and get your car repaired, booking tickets at a restaurant and things like that. That becomes part of WeChat and the culture there. And as was said yesterday by Chris Skinner in his presentation, think of that car that got bingled and was up for repair. It's being able to provide services associated with that. Should banks be getting into that business because they can help connect people up to be able to do things, and banks need to think about how they're going to move forward with that. So just to touch a little bit about a couple of the headwinds or some of the things out there. Again, banks are losing their interchange fees, the fees that you can charge for your transactions. There's a lot of regulatory security. A lot of people are getting fines for not doing the right things with their payment transactions, not checking them appropriately. The days where banks could earn float on transactions are certainly, in most countries now, pretty much disappeared. So really the banks need to think about ways that they can get additional revenue, how their payments can help them with their business. And I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. Just wanted to talk on and give an example around open APIs. People talk a lot about chatbots today. So this example on the screen is really about a conversation between me on my phone with talking to a chatbot to check on some status of my payment transactions and what's taking place there. So at the back of that chatbot, what's happening is it's getting converted into an open API service call to go up into my bank to go and pull information out of potentially the payment system. Maybe it's out of a data store, a payments data store of some sort. Maybe it's out of core banking, but pulling back information about my transactions to the back end of the chatbot, and then the chatbot is displaying that information in user-friendly terms on the screen. Again, if I went to initiate a payment message, the same thing would happen is I would go in there and be able to talk to the chatbot and get it to initiate a payment message for me. At the back of it, it's creating an open API message. Again, staying with the open API side of things, there's a lot of talk about that. What I like to mention is what we hear is people talking, I didn't bring my mobile phone up on the stage, good move, is about that information. What I've got now is a really good example I hear people talk about with what can be used in the use of open APIs is if I'm a consumer and I've got accounts with multiple banks, people here now have apps on their phones connecting up to the banks, and I love using my mobile app phone with my bank in Australia, and it's a really good app and it works really well. But if I've got accounts with multiple banks, if I've got money held in an e-wallet or even stored value cards, I've then got to go and log into the other banks. I've got to go and do that. By using the open APIs and having somebody like an Apple Pay or Google, WeChat, or another fintech company provide an app that can go and pull that information for me, display it on the screen, trigger the payment information to move the money between my accounts at different banks or to top up an e-wallet. You know, that's a value-added service going forward. I would certainly look to use that app. If I was really to be cynical, I would suggest that banks maybe shouldn't get into developing mobile apps anymore. Let these smart, nimble fintech companies develop the app for you. You give them your guidelines. You agree with that app is. It looks really good. You use it for the next 2 years. If in 2 years' time that app's not been updated, they're not been able to make changes, there'll be another fintech company that's got an app there as well that you could tap into and use. They'd be connecting into the bank using open API calls to be able to do that. So there's already standards there in place. You as a bank are not having to make as many changes, but getting the benefits of seeing your customer transactions, retaining your customers, and providing them latest technology, latest capabilities. So there's some opportunities out there, but challenges as well. Not planning to go through this slide, but I just really want to touch on the fact that person-to-person payments is what everybody thinks of when they're talking about real time. But really it's much more than that. And you look at countries like India, where they've opened it up to being a lot of customer to business or SMEs, the pizza guy coming around delivering the pizza, you get a request to pay message to pay for your pizza because you ordered it through your mobile phone and you're paying for it at that time. There's many, many business scenarios that are being involved out there. Go look at the example again, I guess, from Chris Skinner yesterday, where he had the car crash. When you have that car crash, there are multiple things that need to be sorted out, paying the smash repairs, paying for maybe a fine for the accident that occurred, different things. So you want to be able to tie that together, have multiple payments maybe taking place off the back of it. So somebody who can provide solutions to that, being able to pull together multiple business activities over one overall business umbrella is definitely an opportunity going forward. And here's just another example about, here we're talking about, say, a company, they produce some goods, they send the invoice to the small business, that invoice goes as a request to pay. It brings with it the actual invoice that the small business can then look at, open that up, and then trigger the payment to pay for that particular transaction. They've got the details. I take it back to a real scenario of me with my mobile phone bill. I'm travelling around the world. I clock up different amounts each month, so therefore I like to get my phone bill at the end of the month and I look at it to see, yes, that fits with it, rather than being an automatic direct debit, and I get there and then I'll go and approve the payment for that particular thing. But I want to see that invoice, I want to see that extra information. And triggering that will respond back. The benefit to the organisation that initiated the request to pay via their banks is they get back information that guarantees that they'll be able to reconcile that transaction straight away, put it in place. And both sides are much more comfortable with what's taking place. Finally, to start to sort of wrap this up, here you can see domestic payments are free. Everybody, the wallets are free. Basically, there's a lot of expectation out there. Cross-border payments would be free. which is quite disastrous for a lot of the banks for the amount of money that that you have for payments coming across there. So if you convert that to thinking about your low-budget airlines where you buy your cheap ticket, you're able to go and get on the plane, get to where you want to go to. So how do you make money? It's by offering value-added services. So back to the fees, it's about thinking about what value-added services you can provide to your customers to be able to go and do something additional for them. This could be in the form of some nice information about what they're doing in their payments business. It might be about the fact that there's a request for pay message and in there you notice they don't have enough money in their bank account. So you can offer them instant lending, provide attractive rates to them to go and do that. So it's about these type of extra value-added services that you need to be able to do. And underlying that, you need the platforms to be able to handle that. So what we're noticing in the region, not just in the region, but in Europe, in the US, where they're also going through immediate payment schemes, real-time payment scheme changes, but it's causing banks to think about what they're doing with their underlying payments platform. What's the right platform for trying to be able to support all these different types of things that take place? And you know, how do I give, number one, value to my customer? Everyone talks about put the customer first. So trying to put your shoes on there. And the chart there shows that the primary driver for most banks is the fact of customer service, being able to make sure you can provide services for them. But of course there's also the cost and risk pressures that you need to be able to maintain and trying to make sure you put in place that platform that covers different types of technology, different types of innovation that come out in the marketplace. My final slide is just to talk about something that we're doing at Finastra that I think is relevant and interesting to the marketplace here. So, you know, we've got the benefit of having applications and solutions across a wide variety of banking systems. And what we're allowing the banks to do is to innovate with a cloud technology. So what we have is the ability to develop these front-end nice apps, the front-end applications. Now this development could be done by fintechs, it could be done by universities, it could be done by the 18, 19-year-olds who like to go out and write their 7 lines of code. It can be done by the bank's IT themselves. That you can actually go into the cloud, develop your own apps that you believe can add value to your customers, and we've already got 60 fintechs doing that. And we put in place not only the ability to create those apps, but to actually manage and store the apps in the cloud so that there's rules, regulation, security around it, and then giving that ability for the banks to select, or customers themselves to select which apps they want to use. So it's got like an app store, so you can go on there and pick which apps you would like to be able to use to help with your banking business. So we're getting a lot of traction with this, a lot of interest from different banks to being able to leverage off that information that our systems have access to and use as they're processing your transactions across the board. And thank you. Thanks very much, Steve.